Miles Davis is widely regarded as one of the most important jazz musicians of all time, beginning in the 40s playing with Charlie Parker, to the first great quintet with John Coltrane, to Kind of Blue, to the second great quintet, to the Fusion Revolution. Miles was one of the most influential band leaders to walk on the planet, and in his very humble words, changed music 5 or 6 times. Showered with accolade after accolade, Miles is celebrated for his amazing discography and willingness to always push musical boundaries. There's an endless amount of classic Miles Davis albums, and even the most devoted heads probably haven't heard everything this genius has put out. With that being said, though, there is a period of Miles that most jazz enthusiasts often fail to mention. From 1975 to 1980, he took a hiatus from music, and according to him, didn't even pick up his trumpet during this time. Instead of art, Miles was consumed by addiction to sex and drugs, living a reclusive and self-destructive lifestyle that would almost kill him. In 1980, however, Miles returned to recording and began releasing music again, but this new decade marked a significant shift in his style. 80s Miles gets a lot of hate. While his albums sold well at the time and won Grammys, the critics and jazz purists weren't exactly pleased. Time hasn't exactly been the kindest either, and you'll find on most popular music rating websites that these albums aren't exactly loved. You'll more commonly see this music described as cheesy, poorly produced, and mainly too poppy for its own good. Miles wants stardom, and he got it, at the cost of appeasing the jazz snobs. With this video, however, I want to take another pass at these oft-forgotten albums and highlight what I find to actually be a very interesting and quality point in Miles' long and storied career. In my opinion, the 80s were a wonderfully unique time for Miles, complete with high highs and a variety of different sounds. To hopefully convince you that this period is worth checking out, I want to highlight a few albums that I think deserve your attention. I'm not saying all of these releases are 10 out of 10 masterpieces, but they definitely are much better than the public opinion might say. To start off, we have to talk about Miles' comeback album, The Man with the Horn. Released in 1981 and selling over 100,000 copies, this album is a good representation of what 80s Miles was all about. For a large part of this decade, Miles embraced the funk sound wholeheartedly, creating jams drenched in thick groove and sinister swagger. He also moved in a poppier direction as well, no longer releasing the massive jams of the 70s, and instead opting for more succinct and catchy tracks. And guess what? It's really good. Look out for that opener Fat Time, which features a ripping guitar solo from Mike Stern. Miles went on to say he didn't have his chops back for this album, but I'll have to disagree with the jazz legend on this one. Miles' melody lines here are spacey and his tone cutting, slicing through the funk with melodies that skitter and dance in wonderfully psychedelic patterns. Shout is another highlight, being a much more upbeat and bouncy track that leans into that poppy sound I've been talking about. The elephant in the room with this album, however, would be its penultimate song, the title track. Here we see Miles fully embrace the mainstream, as the song features an R&B singer crooning about how great of a musician Miles Davis is. Yes, it's corny, yes, it's egotistical, but goddamn, I still love this song. The interplay between Miles and the singer Randy Hall is fun, and it's got a hell of a hook. I know for some it might be a little much, but in my opinion the cheese works its way around to being enjoyable. Moving on, in 1982, Miles released the double live album We Want Miles, consisting of songs from 3 performances from 1981 to 82. This album features songs from The Man with the Horn, an updated version of My Man's Gone Now from the Miles Davis-Gil Evans collaboration Porgy and Bess, as well as a new reggae-esque song entitled Kicks after the venue in which it was played. Of note, during these recordings, Miles was still very unwell. Near the end of the tour, he required oxygen after performances, and to get the support he needed while playing, he would wear a rubber corset. This record won a Grammy for Best Jazz Instrumental Performance by a Soloist, but received 2 out of 5 stars from Rolling Stone. Not to get ahead of myself, but this might be my favorite album from the post-hiatus period of Davis. I'm a huge sucker for live Miles, with this album Agartha being one of my favorite albums of all time, and We Want Miles certainly delivers. The jams here are reminiscent of the 70s, with the final 2 being about 20 minutes long each. Here the band is thumping, funky, and cocky as hell as they groove their way through these elongated performances. Some of these songs are more furious, some more laid back, But through it all, Miles cuts through the mix like a hot knife through butter, showing that even despite his impaired state, he's still got his it factor, a definite highlight in his career. Skipping ahead a couple albums, we get to 1985's You're Under Arrest. Dealing with issues such as racism, pollution, and nuclear war, this was one of Miles' most explicitly political outings. Here's what Miles says in his autobiography about the message behind this album. That's where the concept for You're Under Arrest came from, being locked up for being part of a street scene, being locked up politically, being subjected to the looming horror of a nuclear holocaust, plus being locked up in a spiritual way. It's the nuclear threat that really is a motherfucker in our daily lives, that and the pollution that is everywhere. Polluted lakes, oceans, rivers, polluted ground, trees, fish, everything. Critically, though, opinions were a little less excited. This is what Rolling Stone writer Francis Davis had to say about this album. Poor Miles. As a thinking man's pop star, he's unbankable in a market that increasingly depends on conditioned reflex. As a jazz blue blood, he's been trading on credit for far too long. To judge from the cover photograph, what with his embroidered jacket and leather trousers, even his fashion sense has deserted him. Brutal. To some extent, I do see where Francis is coming from. This album features not one but two pop covers, with those being Human Nature by Michael Jackson and Time After Time by Cyndi Lauper, to the point where it seems like Miles really wants that radio play. That album art too is definitely something. With that being said though, it's not like these pop covers are bad by any means. In fact, I would argue there's some of the stronger songs here, as Miles weaves his way through these high energy instrumentals. Another song to look out for would be the opener, One Phone Call / Street Scenes, which sounds like a 90s hip-hop skit, featuring everything from not-so-great voice acting from Sting of all people, to simulated coke sniffing. Again, I'll give in that it's a little cheesy, but the music is still that high Miles quality. Also of note is the closer, Then There Were None, which contains a synthesizer that sounds like a nuclear explosion, followed by Miles' lonely trumpet, which, according to him, is supposed to sound like a baby's wailing cry. Overall, You're Under Arrest is a mixed album in some regards, not just in quality but also in tone. Mixing pop covers with nuclear holocaust is certainly a choice. With that being said though, I still definitely enjoy it quite a bit, even with its flaws, and I think it's a very important album in the post-hiatus canon. It's still Miles, and just because he's making music in a slightly different context doesn't mean he's fallen off a cliff all of a sudden. Maybe not the first Miles album I would show someone, but still a good time. It's admirable that Miles continued to experiment and try new things, even if not all of them were perfect. Following You're Under Arrest, Miles released the album Tutu in 1986. Named after Archbishop Desmond Tutu, human rights and anti-apartheid activist, this album went gold and netted Miles another Grammy. Working largely with bassist / multi-instrumentalist Marcus Miller, who wrote most of the album's songs, Tutu is probably the quintessential 80s Miles album in my opinion. It features extensive use of synthesizers, sequencers, and drum machines to create a piece that, for lack of a better term, is very 80s. According to Jazzwise, when the Tutu album appeared in 1986, it divided both fans and critics. Some loved it, others hated it. For some, Tutu heralded an exciting new direction for Miles' music, but for others, it was a sellout to commercialism and new technology. This album features another pop cover in Perfect Way, and interestingly enough, several songs were actually planned to be in collaboration with Prince, as Miles and the Minnesotan pop star were close friends, although this did not materialize. That's all well and good, but is the music worth checking out? In my opinion, a huge yes. Tutu may not be the boundary-pushing and avant-garde bitches brew, but for what it sets out to do, that is, to be a great pop album, Tutu is a complete success. These songs are catchy, exciting, and overall just an absolute joy to listen to. Tracks like Splatch and Full Nelson especially stand out as Miles milestones, with the latter in particular being one of my favorite songs from this period of Miles' career. Yes, it's pop, but it doesn't automatically mean it's bad. For better or for worse, the critics wanted Miles to fit into a box, but Miles wanted to do what Miles wanted to do. I'm not going to pretend Tutu redefined jazz like in a silent way, but you can make amazing albums without reinventing the wheel. The main complaints I see about Tutu would be its production, but to be honest, I think that question is more if you like 80s production or not. I understand that the slick studio sound is not for everyone, but in my opinion, it's not a death sentence by any means. The songs here are strong, the playing inspired, and the mood high. In fact, Tutu is one of my favorite feel-good records, a collection of songs that always puts me in a happy mood. And for that reason, I think it stands with some of Miles' best. Finally, to wrap up this list, I have to talk about 1989's avant-garde Aura. The story behind this album is interesting. In 1984, Miles received the Leone Sunning Music Prize, which is Denmark's highest musical honor. Other famous winners include Igor Stravinsky and Leonard Bernstein, with Miles being the first jazz musician and first black person to win the award. For the awarding event, Danish composer Palle Mikkelborg created the contemporary classical piece Aura. Miles was so impressed by the music that he returned to Denmark in 1985 to record it. Featuring some strange musical theory elements, with Mikkelborg taking the 10 letters in the name Miles Davis and converting them into musical notes, Aura is by all means a very odd album. Combining elements of orchestral, electronic, and jazz music, it stands on its own in the Davis discography. The 9 main songs are all named after colors that Mikkelborg saw in Miles' aura and are generally very empty sounding despite the large number of musicians, with Miles' horn acting as a guide through these alien soundscapes. Is it even jazz? I'm not sure, but I'm also not sure it matters. Miles has always been an artist that works outside of the box, and Aura is another great example of how he's willing to push sound into something totally unique. If you want to hear a new Miles album that exists totally in its own world, then this is the album for you. Highlights would be the track Red, which sounds like something out of a horror movie, complete with shrill string stabs and a brooding atmosphere. The closer, Violet, features John McLaughlin on guitar and Davis playing without a mute to great effect. The rest of the songs are strong too, establishing a peculiar yet compelling atmosphere. This is not your typical Miles album, and it's proof that even in these later years, he was willing to take risks and attempt something totally off the wall. I would have loved to see Miles pursue this sound even further, but the fact that we have it at all is very cool. Overall, Aura is one of the most unique albums in the Miles' entire discography, and is definitely one you don't want to miss. I know I didn't cover every 80s Miles album, but that doesn't mean the ones I skipped are bad. Star People especially is great, and Decoy is pretty good too. I just want to keep this video succinct. I also didn't include Miles' 1992 rap-influenced album Doo-Bop, an album I love that most people hate, as that may get its own video in the future. All in all though, I hope this video helped shine a light on a period from a great musician that unfortunately gets often ignored, glossed over, or even ridiculed. Miles is one of my all-time favorite musicians, and I think this decade deserves more respect than it gets. I'm not going to pretend every album is an absolute masterpiece, but I think it's still a great decade from the jazz legend. I hope you decide to check some of these albums out.